Chapter 6, Deviance. Deviance. What is it? Deviance is a behavior, trait, or belief that departs from a norm and generates a negative reaction in a particular group. Defining something as deviant requires us to examine the group norms and how the group reacts to behavior. Defiance isn't necessarily bad, it's just different from what the group considers to be normal. For instance, a woman having a size 13 shoe isn't bad, but it's definitely different. So it may elicit a reaction from the group that makes up the majority, those with average shoe sizes. When sociologists use the term deviant, they are making a social judgment, not a moral one. Deviance. What is it? What is deviant in one culture may not be deviant in another culture. Are these images examples of norms or deviance in the United States? Remember that C. Wright Mills tells us that norms change over time. Was tattooing a norm in the 1900s, the 1950s, the 2000s? What social factors might influence changing norms? Theories of deviance. Functionalism. Deviance serves a function in our society. According to Emile Durkheim, deviance serves a positive social function by clarifying moral boundaries and promoting social cohesion. Without seeing deviant behavior, we would have a hard time classifying what is normal. It isn't until our group norms are challenged that we come together as a group to defend these norms. For example, the tragic events of September 11, 2001 challenged a norm that many people in the United States took for granted: safety. When the norm was challenged by the terrorist attacks, new policies and procedures were put into place, for instance, airport security, to preserve it. Theories of deviance. Conflict theory. Deviance is a result of social conflict. In order for the powerful to maintain their power, they marginalize and criminalize the people who threaten their power. Inequality is reproduced in the way deviance is defined. Vagrancy laws are in place because the people in power, representatives of dominant culture, have deemed vagrancy to be deviant. Sociologist William Chambliss looked at how the vagrancy laws have been applied differently over the years to homeless, unemployed, racial minorities, or whoever seemed most threatening at the time. He determined that vagrancy laws actually reproduce inequality in our society. Theories of deviance. Structural strain theory, developed by Robert Merton. It states that there are goals in our society that people want to achieve, but they cannot always reach these goals. This creates stress, or strain, because people are aware of the goals, but do not have the means to achieve them. Structural strain theory, sometimes just called strain theory, acknowledges that there are certain goals that society deems acceptable. Ask yourself if you can think of what these goals might be. Common responses would include a nice car, a big house, a family, a good job, lots of money, and so on. Merton's typology of deviance. This table shows the possible combinations of goal and means acceptance. In the following slides, we'll expand on the previous definition, talk about examples of each of these. Remember, goals are not individual personal goals, like saving enough money to buy a new MP3 player. They are socially acceptable goals like the American dream, having a good job, a nice home, a car, money, and so on. Means are always ways of making that happen. For instance, means may refer to socially acceptable routes to achieving the aforementioned goals, like going to college, working hard, starting at the bottom of the company ladder, but working your way to the top, and so on. Theories of deviance. Merton's typology. Conformist. These are the people who work hard in school, go to college, get a job, and save money because they want to buy a nice house, have a fancy car, wear nice clothes, and contribute to their retirement plans. Theories of deviance. Merton's typology. Innovators. These are people who want all the same things as the conformists: a fancy house, nice car, designer clothes. but they aren't interested in going to college and working their way up through their company. Theories of deviance. Merton's typology. Ritualist. Ritualists don't seem to think about the goal or the big picture, and instead they live their lives day to day, paycheck to paycheck. They go to work, have a steady job, and so on, but they probably live in an apartment or in their parents' basement. They don't talk about career moves or retirement, and they simply keep doing their routine every day. Theories of deviance. Merton's typology. Retreatist. Retreatists aren't interested in the goals, and they don't follow the day-to-day routine to achieve the means either. Oftentimes, retreatists withdraw from the system completely. An example would be a hermit or a person who goes to the mountains to live with the goats. Theories of deviance. Merton's typology. Rebels. Rebels are those people who don't accept the goals of society and disagree with the means of achieving them. That means that these people don't covet lots of money, a fancy house, a nice car, and so on. Theories of deviance. Differential association. A symbolic interactionist perspective developed by Edwin Sutherland states that we learn deviance from interacting with deviant peers. Edwin Sutherland suggests that the main reason that people become deviant is that they are learning to be that way from the people they associate with. This theory of deviance may remind you of social learning theory, which says that we tend to mimic significant role models in our life. Theories of deviance. Labeling theory. A symbolic interactionist perspective developed by Howard Becker states that deviance is caused by external judgments, labels, that change a person's self-concept and the way others respond to him or her. Becker suggests that labeling can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy, a prediction that causes itself to come true. Howard Becker asserted that when people are labeled, that label becomes part of their self-image. So if someone tells you that you are smart, you might start perceiving yourself as smart. Likewise, if someone tells you that you are bad and don't behave well, that might become part of your image, and you might begin to act out as a result of that label. Labeling a person can lead to that person acting out their label. This is especially true if that label is anchored or confirmed among many agents of socialization. So if a child is labeled as bad by a parent, and then by the school, and at after-school care, and by friends, the label is increasingly likely to become part of that individual's self-perception. Theories of deviance. Stereotype threat. Self-fulfilling prophecy in which the fear of performing poorly, and thereby confirming stereotypes about one's social group, causes students to perform poorly. Stereotype promise. Self-fulfilling prophecy in which positive stereotypes lead to positive performance outcomes. Stereotype threat and stereotype promise capture how particular labels, positive and negative, can impact our behavior. Notably, such stereotypes are highly racialized in the U.S. Deviant identities. Stigma. Term coined by Irvin Goffman, describes any physical or social attribute that devalues a person or group's identity, and which may exclude those who are devalued from normal social interaction. Passing. Stigmatized individuals may try to pass as if they are part of the mainstream. Deviance and crime. Stigma can be physical, moral, or tribal. For instance, a physical impairment might stigmatize or devalue a potential employee at a workplace. A moral stigma could include character flaws, for instance, talking too much, which could devalue a person's input in a group setting. A tribal stigma could be based on membership to a discredited group, which could be a group that a person chooses to belong to, like a club or organization, or a group that a person is born into, like a race or socioeconomic status. Just like deviance, stigma will depend on the culture and context. Passing is certainly easier for some individuals than others. For example, morally stigmatized individuals may be able to conceal their beliefs, whereas a physically stigmatized individual may have a more difficult time trying to conceal the impairment that causes this stigmatization. This may also be the case with criminals who commit crimes but then go to work and live their lives as non-criminals. Deviance and crime. Deviance. If a behavior is considered deviant, it means that it violates the values and norms of a group, not that it is inherently wrong. However, research on deviance also includes crime. Crime is the violation of a norm that has been codified into law. Again, deviance is referring to an act or behavior that is simply different from what the majority group typically does, and thus generally receives a negative response. In the United States, eating a guinea pig would be considered deviant because most people don't do that. But in Peru, many people eat guinea pigs as a staple part of their diet. Eating guinea pigs isn't wrong, but depending on the culture that you're from, it can definitely be different than the group norm. Punishment for this kind of deviance could include a state-backed sanction, making this a worse punishment than for a non-criminal type of deviance. Deviance and crime. In the United States, serious crimes are punished by imprisonment. In other cultures, types of punishments can include shunning, banishment, corporal punishment. Many different countries, cultures, or regions may not have the resources to incarcerate criminals, so they find other means of punishment, like those listed on this slide. Deviance and crime. Acts deemed criminal and their punishments change over time. During the 1920s and 30s, alcohol was illegal in the United States, but it is legal in most areas in the United States now. In contrast, heroin used to be widely available in the United States. It was sold by bearer until 1910, and the U.S. government even taxed it until it was eventually banned in 1924. Control and punishment. Deterrence. Prevent crime by threatening harsh penalties. Retribution. Retaliate or take revenge for a crime that's been committed. Incapacitation. Remove criminals from society by imprisoning them. Rehabilitation. Reform criminals so that they may re-enter society. These are the four main philosophies of punishment. Each offers a different approach to punishment. Rehabilitation, for instance, suggests that we should include education and training in prisons so that prisoners will be able to contribute to society upon their release. In practice, these philosophies often overlap. Deterrence. If you are in a hurry to class and you start to exceed the speed limit, do you ever slow down because you think, I don't want to get a speeding ticket? If so, the potential penalty has deterred you from committing the crime. Retribution. Have you ever heard the saying, an eye for an eye? That's the premise behind retribution. You've committed a crime, therefore, society has the right to retaliate in a certain way. Incapacitation. May depend on the severity of the crime committed. If our society imprisoned every person who ever jaywalked, there'd be few people left out in society. Then again, if the penalty for jaywalking was imprisonment, maybe fewer people would do it. That's part of the logic behind creating sentences for crimes. Rehabilitation has different degrees of success or failure depending on the crime committed. However, even though rehabilitation is usually less expensive than incarceration, we tend to see more sentences of incarceration than rehabilitation. Why do you think this is? Are there certain crimes that you think should receive more rehabilitation than incarceration? What about drug use or possession? Can deviance be positive? Positive deviance is defined as an act that is outside of the norm, but may actually be heroic rather than negative. Can you think of an act that would be defined as positive deviance?